wildest wooden coaster in the West. GhostRider, you will believe. Only at Knott's.
When Knott's Berry Farm introduced GhostRider in 1998, it was the single largest project in the park's then 78-year history. Knott's wanted GhostRider to be one of the world's greatest roller coasters, and it's fair to say that the park achieved their goal, at least at first. In the ride's first few years, it was highly regarded, but after only a few years of operation, it became incredibly rough. The bone chattering became a major distraction from what the ride had to offer, and its favorability plummeted. Let's take a deep dive into the history of GhostRider, why it became so rough, and how the ride was completely revitalized in 2016 to become a world-class wooden roller coaster once again. It's fair to say that GhostRider was transformed from a problematic roller coaster to a theme park marvel. Well, almost. For such a major ride at one of America's busiest theme parks, it has a laughably bad capacity. If you ever have to wait in a long line for this ride, I'm sorry. No joke, you could probably watch this video 3 or 4 times while waiting in line for GhostRider. And real quick, if you guys wouldn't mind, please hit the like button as that helps the channel greatly against the YouTube algorithm. Alright, let's dig in. Located in the historic ghost town at Knott's Berry Farm, GhostRider has been thrilling riders since December 8th of 1998. The introduction of Ghost Town was significant for Knott's Berry Farm and helped the park grow into the theme park it is today. But the true catalyst that led to even the formation of Ghost Town was a berry. In 1923, Walter and Cordelia Knott opened a roadside stand on State Route 39 in Buena Park, California, where they sold berries grown from their farm. Back then, Route 39 was the main route from Los Angeles to Huntington Beach, and the stand's location in Buena Park was a perfect halfway point for travelers to take a break. In 1927, the Knott family bought land and built themselves a more permanent store to replace the stand. The store included a small tea room where Cordelia sold sandwiches, jams, and pies made from the farm's berries. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, the price of land dropped heavily. Walter took this opportunity to buy cheap land and expand his family farm, even if they were struggling to make ends meet. In 1932, Walter learned of a new berry that had been created by a quote-unquote Mr. Boysen. This led Walter to search through a phone book where he eventually got in touch with Rudolph Boysen, who had created the berry. Boysen admitted to experimenting with a berry that was a cross between a red raspberry, blackberry, and loganberry. Unfortunately, he had left his experimental berry plants behind at his previous property. Luckily, Walter and some men were able to locate one of Boysen's experimental berry plants and got permission from the new landowners to take cuttings of the plant back to his farm. Walter cultivated the cuttings and just a year later saw the growth of massive berries that had a sweet tart flavor. The family began selling the new berries in 1934, and Cordelia incorporated them into her tea room menu. The unnamed berry would quickly become a massive hit, and Walter eventually named it the boysenberry in tribute to its true creator. But even with the introduction of the boysenberry, the Great Depression still made things difficult. That would all change when Cordelia had the brilliant idea to serve fried chicken dinners to her tea room guests in June of 1934. Walter described this moment as a major turning point for the farm. Word spread of the delicious fried chicken, causing people to flock to the Knott's farm and tea room. The dining room originally sat 20 people, and in 1935 was expanded to 40, followed by another expansion in 1936 to 70. The tea room was quickly turned into a full-fledged restaurant and was expanded to seat 350 to avoid long lines of people waiting. But even this didn't rid the usual 3-hour line. To entertain waiting guests, Walter's daughter Virginia set up a card table with small gift items for sale. As the restaurant grew, so did her small shop, which would eventually turn into Virginia's gift shop, a store you can still shop at today. But even this wasn't enough to handle the growing guests. In 1941, Walter Knott introduced Ghost Town, a tribute to the Old West that featured real old western buildings, buggies, and other things that Walter brought in from Prescott, Arizona. Ghost Town grew so popular that guests began solely visiting the Knott's property for it, and not even the chicken dinners. In 1947, Walter named his expanding enterprise Knott's Berry Farm, and introduced the Pan for Gold attraction where guests could grab a pan and sift for real gold just like miners did in 1849. Guests could even take this gold home, and Pan for Gold is still a popular attraction at Knott's today. Things would heat up further when Walter Knott teamed up with Wendell Bud Hurlbut. Upon a handshake agreement, Bud Hurlbut agreed to design and build what would become the Calico Mine Ride, a famous attraction still in operation today. Guests climb inside mine carts and travel through dimly lit caverns and tunnels of a working gold mine. The 1960 attraction is honestly beautiful, and I highly recommend it to anyone visiting Knott's. In 1969, Bud Hurlbut would work alongside the renowned ride manufacturer Aero Development and deliver the Calico Log Ride, which now goes by Timber Mountain Log Ride. Guests take a journey through scenic woods and an authentic lumber mill. These two rides further solidified Knott's dominance, and even Walt Disney himself was heavily impressed and inspired by these attractions. Knott's would continue to make major strides for the next several decades. After enclosing the park in 1968 and charging $1 for admission, Walter's youngest daughter, Marion, would move past Ghost Town and introduce a new themed land, Fiesta Village. Fiesta Village would later become home to Montezuma's Revenge in 1978, a launch-looping shuttle roller coaster built by Schwarzkopf. As cool as this coaster was, the park had introduced an even more revolutionary ride in 1975, Corkscrew. Built by Aerodynamics, Corkscrew was the world's first modern steel inverting roller coaster to open to the public. The ride was in the new Roaring 20 section of the park that Marion built in tribute to her parents, as Cordelia had sadly passed away in 1974 at the age of 84. 1973 saw the introduction of Knott's Halloween Haunt, which started as a 3-night Halloween event that grew into the world-famous Knott's Scary Farm event that we know today. 1976 saw the addition of Motorcycle Chase, a 4-tracked steeplechase coaster built by Aerodynamics. 1983 saw the addition of Camp Snoopy, an entire children's area of the park themed to the Peanut characters. 1988 saw the addition of Bigfoot Rapids. 1990 saw the addition of Boomerang, which replaced Corkscrew. 1997 saw the removal of Motorcycle Chase, which had been renamed Wacky Soapbox Racers, and the introduction of the problematic roller coaster Windjammer. 1997 would also see the largest change to the farm since Cordelia Knott started serving her fried chicken. After 78 years of family ownership, the Knott family made the tough choice to sell the park. They were having a hard time keeping up with their local competitors, Disneyland, Universal Studios Hollywood, and Six Flags Magic Mountain, which were all owned by large corporations capable of spending large amounts on their properties. And there were ambitious plans to turn Knott's Berry Farm into this, a resort that rivaled Universal and Disney. The family knew that the park would be better off in the hands of a corporation that could invest more heavily and maybe make this dream a reality. Several companies approached the family about purchasing Knott's. One was even Disney, who had the goal of adding Knott's to the nearby Disneyland Resort. Disney had recently failed to build a new park near Washington, D.C., which would have been called Disney's America in tribute to American history. Disney hoped to use Knott's to bring Disney's America to fruition. In the end, the family sold the park to Cedar Fair, the same company that operates Cedar Point in Ohio, for $245 million as they trusted the brand to maintain the Knott's family-oriented tradition. The park's new general manager, Jack Falfus, swore that they would never get rid of Ghost Town or change anything about the chicken dinner restaurant. But the Knott family were still involved with the introduction of one last hurrah: GhostRider. Planning for GhostRider had started nearly 5 years prior to the ride's completion, years before Cedar Fair came into the picture. The park wanted GhostRider to be larger and longer than Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain, a racing wooden roller coaster that opened in 1978. Robin Hall, who was then Knott's Berry Farm's Vice President of Design and Architecture, said they increased the original height of GhostRider's lift hill from 112 feet to 118 feet to make this happen. Ironically, Robin Hall had also helped design Colossus. The ride would be appropriately located in Ghost Town, behind the California Marketplace, which is home to Mrs. Knott's Chicken Dinner Restaurant and Virginia's Gift Shop. It would cross Grand Avenue, which is the old State Route 39, 4 times and take up a former part of the parking lot. It would even be Ghost Town's first new ride since the Timber Mountain Log Ride in 1969. Robin Hall said he had 2 goals with GhostRider: to have the ride reach out to Beach Boulevard, where it could act as a billboard to advertise the park, which the ride successfully does with its first turnaround. The other goal was to clear expansion space by relocating warehouses away from the main entrance. The overall project would cost around $24 million, and most of that money wasn't spent on GhostRider itself, but relocating the various buildings that occupied the space GhostRider uses now. Here we have artwork for a different layout of GhostRider, which was likely considered but ultimately scrapped. You'll notice the lift hill, first drop, and overall layout are different, but this version of GhostRider would have occupied the same space the real version does today. According to Robin Hall, Cedar Fair actually attempted to stop the GhostRider project once they became the owners of the park. as they felt the project wasn't exciting enough. Cedar Fair were more interested in adding a hypercoaster, which is a coaster over the height of 200 feet, like they had been doing at their other properties during the 90s. But so much money was already spent on the project, probably for design work and relocating various buildings, that Cedar Fair reluctantly allowed the project to continue. But there were cost cuttings, like the elimination of a pre-show before riders boarded the coaster. The park would work with ride manufacturer Custom Coasters International, or CCI, who had been building wooden roller coasters since 1992. Many of their rides were world famous, such as the Raven at Holiday World, which opened in 1995, and helped put Holiday World on the map. Story has it that CCI won the bid to build GhostRider sometime around late 1997, while they were still completing construction of Excalibur at Funtown Splashtown, USA in Maine. Denise Denleric, the president of CCI, told her construction crew to pack up and get ready to head to California so they could start work on GhostRider. Denise had apparently promised Knott that the ride would be ready by late 1998, even if Knott was advertising a 1999 opening. As a result, she allegedly left only 2 construction workers to finish Excalibur, and Funtown Splashtown had to finish most of the construction themselves. After relocating to Orange County, California, CCI's construction crew were now left to build another massive coaster without a break, leaving them jaded and unmotivated. Rumor has it that CCI would underbid on projects to help win contracts, meaning they would claim it would cost them less to build a coaster than it really would. Often, the company would take shortcuts to meet the estimated cost they promised parks. With Excalibur, CCI fell short and never built the planned tunnel. And upon a structural evaluation a few years later, it was found that Excalibur was missing over 100 bents, or sections of vertical wooden support structure. This is very similar to what the Roller Coaster Corporation of America, or RCCA, did when building Son of Beast at Kings Island. But CCI did build rides that offered excellent experiences. Just the rides themselves were built cheap and not to last. I believe this is a major contributor to the problems that GhostRider would later suffer. Going back to the construction of GhostRider, the ride was now being built by an unmotivated group. On top of that, the coaster featured a more dense and overbuilt structure compared to your typical wooden roller coaster. This ensured the ride complied with California building code to handle the seismic forces of earthquakes. Construction of the entire project would take about 2 years, with clearing backstage buildings and constructing new ones taking over a year, and the coaster itself taking about 11 months. Overall, GhostRider itself would cost the park $7.5 million US. The ride was built to take up as little space as possible. The 2 laps of the double out and back L-shaped layout were built within one another, with the taller first lap within view and the second lap taking place within the ride structure. Many portions of the ride are only as wide as the 4 sections of track making up both laps, such as most of the ride's lift hill, where you have the track of the final brake run, the lift hill, the climb into the mid-course brake run, and the drop out of the mid-course. The ride's first airtime hill is only as wide as the 4 tracks of the section also. Even the ride's storage track is built alongside the lift hill underneath the station and final brake run. The ride only grows wider during its beginning and middle turnarounds located within the park, the far end turnaround near Beach Boulevard, and during the ending helix. Yet confined within this constricted space is the 2.5 million board feet of southern yellow pine. This is supposedly the same amount of wood used to build Son of Beast in 2000. CCI would finish constructing GhostRider 66 days ahead of schedule, as evident in this flyer, and it would officially open to the public on December 8th of 1998, where it was met with immediate fanfare. Simply put, the ride was excellent. It offered pretty much everything sought after with a great wooden roller coaster. It had a long layout filled with fantastic airtime, relentless pacing, powerful lateral forces, endless head choppers, and an experience that thrill seekers could enjoy as well as families. Not only that, but the ride was smooth. It quickly attracted lines up to 2 hours on the regular. The story of GhostRider begins with a Union soldier during the Civil War who ventured out west following a tale of gold to be found in California. Settling in the California boomtown of Calico, this gentleman found work in the famous Calico mine. What exactly happened to him is unknown, but according to local folklore, this gentleman ventured into the Calico mine on horseback one dark night and never returned. Following his mysterious disappearance, locals recall seeing something odd in the sky on dark, clear nights. The mysterious sightings appeared to be a ghost on board a horse riding across the sky. So as the legend goes, the odd sightings became known as the Ghost Rider in the Sky. The experience begins as riders enter the queue through an old mine shaft which used to be the original entrance to Pan for Gold. In fact, Pan for Gold was relocated to another area in Ghost Town to make room for GhostRider. Walter Knott's 1939 volcano was also moved to make way. The old volcano was described as the only active volcano in Southern California, and that it had been relocated from the Mojave Desert. Apparently, its main function was to cover up a cement irrigation pipe. Going back to GhostRider, the queue would wind its way past the ride's beginning track and into the GhostRider Mine & Co. building. After passing through switchbacks on the lower level, guests climb to the second floor where they encounter more switchbacks. The back half of the station building supports the ride's turnaround leading into the mid-course brake run, as evident by the massive wooden timbers, and you can feel the structure shaking each time a train cruises over. Riders finally hop aboard one of the ride's 3 mining cars or trains built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters or PTC. Each of the ride's trains were 7 cars long and sat a total of 28 riders. The originals came in 3 different colors: copper, silver, and gold. In 1999, GhostRider would be ranked as the 13th best wooden roller coaster by the Golden Ticket Awards, followed by 8th place in 2000 and then 6th place in 2001, 2002, and 2003. The ride was famous for many things, and one of those was the famous drop off the mid-course brake run nicknamed the Drop. Trains cruised through the brakes without slowing down at all and were sent plummeting into the ride's second half, delivering powerful airtime to riders in the back half of the train. The ride also opened without a roof over its first drop, but in 2001, the park added the roof we have today to help address noise complaints from nearby neighbors. While the roof isn't the most aesthetically pleasing, it adds an awesome head chopper effect, especially for riders in the back of the train who get flung into the first drop. But early in the ride's career, an event would trigger a change that, from what I understand, would ultimately aid the ride in becoming exceptionally rough. On Monday, August 23rd, 1999, GhostRider suffered an accident that injured 5 riders after operating normally for the first hour of the day. According to Jack Falfus, the constant pounding and flexing of the running coaster had wiggled loose a 3-inch nail. This caused a 3-foot piece of wood from the ride's track to poke upward, enough to where it caught the bottom of a running train, making it flip toward the passengers and injure 5 riders. A 58-year-old Japanese tourist was the most seriously injured and required 6 stitches to close a gash on his head. He was then hospitalized overnight for observation. The piece of wood that broke free was oddly one that was non-weight bearing. Like almost all wooden roller coasters, GhostRider's track consists of a stack of 8 layers of lumber. Each layer is 2 inches thick and are mainly 8 or 10 inches wide. But the piece of wood that broke free was only 2 inches wide, as it was located on one of the ride's turns. On only straight sections do the wooden boards sit all the way across the track. On curves, the track must be cut in a way that includes smaller pieces to make the bend. These are called trim pieces, and they keep the track a consistent width during turns. This is a classic build process for wooden roller coasters, and many experts in wooden coaster design and construction were baffled. Michael M. Black, chief executive of the Roller Coaster Corporation of America, a wooden coaster manufacturer, said this: "For a board to just come off, I don't understand it. I can't imagine a piece of wood coming off a laminated track. It doesn't make sense." Black also said that his company had no plans to make any safety modifications to their wooden roller coasters because he believed the accident at Knott's was a freak event. Carpenters had walked the entire track length of GhostRider the morning of the accident, just like they always do, to check for any loose or broken bolts as well as damaged track pieces. They found no irregularities during their inspection and allowed the ride to open like normal. During the day-to-day operation of a wood coaster, it's common for bolts to come loose or even break off, because they are more rigid than the ductile wooden structure, which moves a lot. But there are so many redundant bolts and fasteners that hold up each piece of wood that it's almost impossible for a wood piece to just fall off. Look at this photo of GhostRider operating with a loose bolt that would normally secure the ledger to the batter brace or diagonal bent post. The ride has several other bolts in the same location that will hold the ledger in place until that bolt is retightened the next morning, which shows how weird it is for a piece of wood that should have been fastened to the track in multiple ways to come loose. Denise Denleric examined the ride the next day and then approved plans by Knott to install metal bracing straps around the stacks of lumber that make up the ride's track. During all curves of the ride that featured trim pieces, every 8 feet of track would feature at least 3 metal straps. which means roughly 60% of GhostRider's 4,533 feet of track would need metal brace straps applied. This is what the metal straps looked like. They wrapped around all 8 layers of lumber to help hold the track together, which limited the chance of another trim piece from separating. In these same sections of ride, the park also added extra ribbed nails into the support boards for additional strength. While these metal straps made it less likely a trim piece would come loose, it had the adverse effect of making the ride stiffer. Wooden coasters are flexible on purpose and are built to give under the weight of a moving train, whereas steel coasters are much harder and rigid and don't flex nearly as much because steel is a stronger material. While watching a wooden coaster shake and bend may be frightening, it's necessary. This allows the track and structure to properly absorb the force of a heavy coaster train as it passes by, and it also helps to keep a wooden coaster smooth. But by applying metal straps to over 60% of GhostRider's track, this altered the ability of the wooden track to bend and deform. And like I mentioned earlier, GhostRider already featured a more rigid wooden structure than most wood coasters, and that's to handle the seismic forces of earthquakes. The San Andreas Fault runs right through California, which subjects the state to earthquakes of varying magnitudes. Earthquakes send seismic waves ricocheting through the ground and across the surface, and it's crucial that all structures in earthquake-prone areas are built to handle the energy of an earthquake. Thus, GhostRider is built to handle not only wind forces against the structure and the forces the ride acts upon itself, but also to withstand energy that comes from the ground. To be brief, earthquakes transmit energy into a structure which must be dissipated. There are many different methods that allow different types of buildings to withstand such forces. Structures built with wood are actually well equipped for earthquakes because wood is such a ductile material. The flexibility of wood allows it to move and shift as it absorbs the energy of an earthquake, and because wood is so ductile, the material can deform and then rebound to its original shape after the forces have been dissipated without any damage. But even so, it's still important that wood structures are reinforced enough so that they don't fall apart as they are shaken from the energy of an earthquake, especially at the bottom. Compared to your typical wooden coaster built by CCI, GhostRider features extra reinforcements in its structure. To teach you guys how so, let me first explain the components that make up the structure of a wooden coaster. Wood coasters are built using bents, which are vertical sections of reinforced structure that are connected laterally and diagonally to other vertical bents. At the bottom of a bent are footings or concrete foundations that are built into the ground. Extending vertically from the footings are bent posts. Connecting the two bent posts are lateral members called chords. Connected diagonally between the bent posts and chords are cross bracing members. And at the top of the bent is a larger lateral member called a ledger that supports the ride's track. Connecting each bent to the next are lateral members called ribbons that run perpendicular to the bent post. In addition to the ribbons are diagonal cross-bracing members that also connect bents to one another. Here's where GhostRider features extra reinforcements. At the bottom of many of the ride's bents, the bent posts double in width. There are often two bent posts next to each other like so, rather than a single member like on most wood coasters. But note that these double bent posts don't continue all the way up to the top of the structure. This is because the bottom of the structure must be able to absorb the shaking from the top of the structure that is induced from an earthquake and transfer it back into the ride's foundations. Otherwise, the structure could shake way too much and quite literally fall apart. The ride also features double cross-bracing members and double chords in many locations. These aren't limited to just the bottom of the structure and seem to be found throughout the entire structure. This helps to make the structure far more rigid, which reduces the amount of shaking possible to begin with when an earthquake takes place. As far as the members that connect bents to each other, I see no difference with the number of ribbons used on the structure, but it does appear that the ride features what I'd say is double the amount of diagonal cross-bracing. But rather than doubling the amount of cross-bracing in a single section like in the bents, the diagonal cross-bracing members are more densely placed around the structure. These additional structural components help ensure that GhostRider doesn't shake itself apart during an earthquake, but it does make the structure far stiffer than your average wooden roller coaster. The added stiffness helps to conserve the speed of trains through the layout, as less energy from the moving train is lost to structural movement. Therefore, GhostRider is very long for its height compared to most coasters, and it also helps the ride keep up its incredible pacing all the way to the finish. But the added stiffness had the adverse effect of making it easier for GhostRider to become rough, since the track can't give as much against the rigid structure. In fact, I think it's because the ride was so stiff that a wooden trim piece was able to pop off at all, as it may have not been able to flex as much as needed. And now that Knott had stiffened the track further with metal bracing straps, the flexing of the track was limited further. And with the metal straps, I don't think the track would flex consistently anymore, meaning an entire section would shift as a whole unit. Instead, the track would give slightly how it was designed to, and then give less at each metal strap, which over time probably began to cause noticeable bumps and jolts, as I imagine the track began to deform further and further at each strap. Then just imagine that the metal straps repeated every few feet, meaning there were constant jolts that would continuously repeat. I hear GhostRider was rather smooth up until about 2002 or so, and then things went quickly downhill. For starters, wooden coasters built by CCI are already prone to becoming very rough, as their coasters exert a lot of forces, especially side to side. They really needed a much more durable track system to handle all the forces being applied to them without deforming and becoming rough. From what I understand, GhostRider was one of the more forceful CCI coasters, and its track took a beating, especially with the added metal bracing. GhostRider probably could have stayed smooth if Knott chose to close the ride more often for retracking, but the park is open year-round, nearly 365 days a year, and with it being a headlining attraction, the park kept it cycling with small repairs every now and then. The park would replace the top 2 layers of track in certain areas, but it wasn't enough. With the ride beating itself apart, it really needed to have all 8 layers of track replaced in many locations, just like Holiday World does when retracking the Voyage. Retracking all 8 layers ensures that the rough base layer is eliminated entirely and replaced with smooth, strong, brand new lumber. But by only replacing the top 2 layers, it was like temporarily filling large potholes on a freeway with cheap asphalt. In many areas where the park did replace the top 2 layers, you'll see the metal straps were not reattached, but the straps remained attached to the original 6 layers below. Things got so bad that in 2011, Knott's reprogrammed GhostRider so that trains came to a dead stop at the mid-course brake run above the ride station. This slowed trains greatly during the ride's second half, which helped to lessen the roughness of the ride and reduce the rate at which the ride was growing rougher. I hear the second half wasn't completely ruined by this, but it did greatly reduce the airtime on the drop, and it killed the ride's relentless pacing. In the days before GhostRider's closure, I've read terrible reviews of it as such. I'll be honest, I consider myself a veteran roller coaster rider. I've been on coasters all around the world, throughout Europe and the United States, but I must say, I found GhostRider completely unrideable. After the first drop and the left turn into the second hill, I knew I was in for another 1 to 2 minutes of extreme jolting, shifting, pulling, spine splitting, and bracing. At this point, I am surprised the ride is even able to open to the public. There was a rider sitting in the middle of the train that was literally holding his neck by the time we got to the mid-course brake run. Well, thankfully, Knott would take action. On August 20th, 2015, the park announced it would perform a massive restoration and refurbishment to GhostRider. Knott shut down the ride on September 8th that year and immediately got to work. The ride was scheduled to reopen with Ghost Town for its 75th anniversary in 2016. Rumors began to spread as the ride's track and catwalks were removed, leaving a barren structure. Would this be like Magic Mountain's transformation of Colossus into Twisted Colossus done by Rocky Mountain Construction, which turned the former Woody into a steel coaster, or just a wooden retrack? Thankfully, on November 3rd of 2015, the park announced the rebuild was being performed by Great Coasters International, or GCI, a renowned manufacturer of wooden roller coasters. The same company who had also built Cedar Fair Gold Striker at California's Great America in 2013. Adam Yurden, a design engineer at GCI, said that unfortunately, GhostRider had fallen apart. It was still very safe, but that Southern California is not a forgiving climate for wooden coasters. It's really dry, and wooden coasters need water. In fact, some parks literally have sprinkler systems built into their wooden coasters and water them when needed. The company would fully replace all 8 layers of track for 3,800 feet of the ride's layout. So basically, all of the ride's track from the first drop to the final brake run. And with the retrack, all of the metal straps that Knott added to the ride in 1999 were removed. Also part of the plan was to remove the mid-course brake run by eliminating the brakes, as GCI found the mid-course unnecessary due to the slow operations at the ride. I'll get more into that later, but this ensured that trains couldn't be brought to a stop any longer mid-ride. GCI also added a new magnetic brake system to the final brake run to bring trains to a smoother stop. The ride's profiling was also changed in certain locations. In some areas like this right turn here, additional banking was added to help limit lateral forces. with the goal of making the ride last longer in areas like this. Even some of the airtime hills were altered to give more airtime, like the small bunny hill following the famous drop off the mid-course brake run. GCI would deliver 3 brand new Millennium Flyer trains to replace the original PTC trains. The new trains are trailered, meaning the first car has 2 axles, but every car following has only 1 axle, and is trailered to the car in front. This allows the trains to track the course far smoother than the 2-axle PTC trains, which more so slid and pushed their way around the track, especially during turns. The new trains are 12 cars long and seat a total of 24 riders per train, 4 riders less than the PTC trains, which held 28 riders. GCI also used an extremely durable wood type for GhostRider's new track, which would help to keep the ride smooth for years to come. The bottom 6 layers of track were still constructed using southern yellow pine like you see here, but in many locations as shown here, the top 2 layers of track were built with Ipe wood, a Brazilian variety that is extremely hard and durable. Ipe is very expensive, so it was only used where necessary. That's why in this photo, it's only on the right side rail, as this rail takes more of the beating around a left curve. Ipe is used on both rails during the valleys between 2 hills, and on the outside rail during other turns of the ride, such as the final helix. Notice the darker wood on the left rail here. This is a construction method that CCI should have adopted right from the start when they first built GhostRider, as the forces the ride exerts are just far too much for southern yellow pine unless constant retracking is performed. The ride would begin testing in late May of 2016. The new trains looked and sounded great as they smoothly flew through the new track, but the ride's reopening was unfortunately pushed back a few weeks from the original date of May 27, 2016 to June 11, 2016 as construction work took longer than anticipated. The revamped GhostRider would make its grand debut on June 11th as planned, and once again, the ride was met with favorable fanfare. The original experience was back, and smoother than ever. Reviews were raving about the ride, and almost all were more than satisfied by the transformation, except for a few who say the ride was wilder back when it opened. GCI did add additional banking to many of the ride's turns, which limits the amount of lateral forces that may have previously existed. I never rode the CCI version of GhostRider, but to me, the GCI version still exerts plenty of laterals, much more than you find on most wooden coasters. The ride begins with a small left turn into a gentle drop that leads into an ascending turnaround that makes its way towards the lift hill. The lift hill runs parallel to the station building and climbs underneath one of the ride's turnarounds. Riders get a great view of the surrounding Orange County, California. The train reaches the top and begins to plummet the 108-foot drop sloped at 51 degrees. Riders in the back cars receive great floater airtime as they are whipped over the crest. The roof above the drop also makes for a great head chopper effect. The train plunges below the ride's ending helix as it rips through a left turn at 56 miles per hour, as it races through the ride's structure, delivering lateral forces. The train pulls up into a large airtime hill, delivering great floater airtime to all riders, especially those in the front cars. The train drops back down and rises into the far end turnaround near Beach Boulevard. Riders in the front cars get good airtime during the ascent. The train banks slightly to the left and cruises through a swooping turnaround that keeps riders pinned to the right side of the train. You then climb into what I believe is the ride's second tallest hill at 80 feet. After a brief pause, the train begins to descend through an unbanked right-hand turn into a drop all the way to ground level that delivers great airtime to riders in the back of the train. The minecarts dash into a right-hand turn suspended over the ride's ending helix that leaves riders pinned to the left side of their seats. The train dives underneath the structure of the ride's lift hill and then climbs high into the air through another turnaround over the lift hill. It feels like the train loses a good amount of speed until you rip through the unbanked right turn that delivers a good amount of lateral forces. If you receive laterals during this turn, you know the ride is running nice and quick as it should. The train coasts through some straight track and into the drop, which delivers powerful airtime to riders seated in the back cars. You then power over 2 low-to-the-ground airtime hills that curve to the left as riders receive extremely strong airtime as well as some good lateral forces. I honestly find the first hill in the front rows to offer the strongest airtime on the entire ride, even more so than what the drop delivers to back row riders. Next is an airtime hill within the structure of the ride, delivering great floater airtime for all riders, followed by a sharp and unbanked left turn that leads into another swooping turnaround within the structure of the swooping turnaround earlier in the ride. The lateral forces here are extremely strong as you are glued to the left side of the train. Coming out of this turnaround is another airtime pop as you ride within the coaster structure. The pacing of the ride's second half is immaculate and feels even faster than the first half. Next is another powerful airtime hill that delivers strong floater airtime to all riders, followed by another hill without any airtime that leads into the insane ending helix. The helix is 450 degrees of unbanked clockwise rotation that leaves you pinned to the left side of the train, for about 10 seconds straight. The laterals make the speed feel insane, and you feel like the train will rip off the track. It's honestly one of my favorite ending elements on any roller coaster. There's even a little bit of airtime mixed in. You finally exit the helix and hit one last airtime pop that delivers good airtime in the front rows. And then you finally come to a smooth stop in the final brake run. For its height, GhostRider is extremely long. In fact, it has a slightly longer ride duration than Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point from first drop to final brake run. My first ride on GhostRider in May of 2017 left me speechless. The ride was relentless, smooth, and just pure fun. In fact, I prefer GhostRider to other famous roller coasters in the area like Twisted Colossus at Magic Mountain and even X2. To me, GhostRider is just pure fun, and I love how the ride just seems to get better and better the further it goes into the layout. It's kind of like Phoenix at Knoebels, where every hill seems to feel faster and more intense than the one before. And a night ride on the coaster is even better with the orange chaser lights that follow the track through the whole circuit. It makes the ride feel even faster. I've waited 2.5 hours for GhostRider, and I still thought that excruciating wait was worth it. But to be brutally honest, that 2.5 hour wait for GhostRider should not exist on the regular like it often does. As much as I love this coaster, its capacity is awful. It's atrocious for a busy theme park in one of America's most populated areas. And I really hope that someone higher up from Knott's Berry Farm and Cedar Fair is watching, because myself and many others would love to see changes. A park with an attendance over 4 million guests a year shouldn't run their most popular coaster at just over 400 riders per hour. And I'd like to clarify that I don't mean to throw any shade at GCI or the ride operators who work GhostRider daily. Let me explain. GhostRider is a long ride designed to run 3 trains. But even before its refurbishment, Knott's only operated GhostRider with 2 of its 3 trains because they couldn't load trains fast enough to avoid stacking. To be honest, I'm not sure if Knott's ever ran 3 trains on GhostRider. Now the benefit of this is that since Knott's is a year-round park, 2 trains are always available while the third undergoes its yearly rebuild. And the ride cycles less with 2 trains, which does reduce wear and tear. But because the ride is so long, you really need 3 trains to have good capacity. Unlike most GCI coasters that are shorter in length, maybe 45 seconds from first drop to final brake run, GhostRider is over 80 seconds. When the ride was redone in 2016, GCI recommended the mid-course brake run be removed because the park couldn't load trains fast enough to justify its existence. I personally don't blame GCI for that, as it guarantees their new ride will always operate at full speed. But Knott's and Cedar Fair should have taken the opportunity to instead keep the block zone and ramp up the operations at GhostRider. Before I go further, let me explain what a block zone is. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a block zone is a section of ride that only one train may occupy. At the end of a block zone is a method to stop a train in case the block zone ahead is still occupied. This is the safety system that prevents roller coaster trains from colliding with one another. This is the set of block zones that GhostRider opened with in 1998. First was the station, or E block. Next was the lift hill, or A block, which ended at the crest of the lift. Following was B block, or basically from the crest of the lift hill to the mid-course brake run. Next was C block, the second half of the ride following the mid-course until the final brake run. And last was D block, or the approach brake zone before the station, so a total of 5 block zones that comfortably allowed the ride to run 3 trains. CCI claimed the ride had a theoretical capacity of 1,600 riders per hour with the original 28 passenger trains. To pull this off, a train would need to be dispatched every 63 seconds, an interval which would have looked like this. As I mentioned earlier, when the ride was redone in 2016, the mid-course block zone was removed, which combined B block and C block into one long block zone. GCI kept the same 2 block zones on the ride's final brake run, but reprogrammed them to sort of act as one. So while the block zones looked like this, they functioned more like this, where basically 3 of the ride's original block zones became one massive block. So a train could only crest the lift hill once the train ahead had cleared the end of the original D block and entered the station. Whereas pre-refurb, a train could crest the lift hill as soon as the train ahead cleared the mid-course brake run, or B block. The new programming is the way that a lot of 2-train coasters operate, like El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. The only problem is that GhostRider is very long. The operating manual claims it takes 2 minutes and 40 seconds for the ride to cycle, but I find the exact timing to be about 3 minutes and 3 seconds from when the train dispatches to when it parks in the station. That's the same time it takes Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure to cycle its track. And trust me, Nitro is a long ride, but with the new block setup, each train on GhostRider could only dispatch when the train on the track was completing the ending helix. But from what I saw in 2017, the crew would still stack trains behind the station anyway due to slow loading procedures and slow moving guests. But occasionally, the ride crew would dispatch trains quite early, often causing trains to block check at the top of the lift hill while they waited for the train ahead to fully exit the approach block zone and enter the station. So in September of 2018, the park added back the mid-course brake run and returned B block and C block to their original configurations like so. Also, I should clarify that just because a block zone is present doesn't mean that trains have to slow down. The ride originally opened with a block zone in this location in 1998, and trains did not slow down at all until 2011. And with the return of B block in 2018, the ride was also reprogrammed so that trains could be dispatched as soon as the train on the course cleared the first Beach Boulevard turnaround here. But C block and D block still effectively act as one block zone. So this new timing ensures that when a train reaches the end of B block, the train ahead would have fully cleared D block and entered the station. Now, as helpful as this is, the ride still only runs 2 trains and really needs all 3 to take advantage of this change. Say if a train were to dispatch from the station as soon as the one on the course cleared the Beach Boulevard turnaround. This leaves an empty station for well over 90 seconds while the train on the track completes the circuit. Either way, Knott wants the ride crew to dispatch 23 to 26 trains per hour, which translates to 552 to 624 riders per hour. I find the restraint checks at GhostRider to be efficient, but with the way that storage bins are placed on the platform for loose articles, guests take their sweet time to board into each train, like extra long at GhostRider compared to other coasters. So I kid you not, GhostRider operates on average with about 20 dispatches each hour and 450 riders per hour. That's a dispatch about every 3 minutes. Then factor in fast lane, which gets priority over the regular standby line, and guests boarding from the exit with an ADA pass. And maybe half of those 450 riders per hour actually applies to the massive standby line. When I waited for GhostRider in 2017 on a busy day, it had about the slowest moving line I've ever waited in for a major roller coaster. Some Wild Mouse coasters with their little 4-person cars, like the Dark Knight coasters at various Six Flags parks, operate at a higher capacity. Even S&S Free Spins with their 8-passenger cars can operate at higher capacities than GhostRider. The Joker crew at Great Adventure has hit 700 riders per hour in the past. I've personally operated El Toro at Great Adventure with just 1 train on many occasions. We don't allow loose articles on the platform, and with just 1 train, we'd hit 15 to 16 dispatches an hour and achieve well over 500 riders each hour thanks to the larger 36-passenger trains and shorter cycle time of the ride, meaning the line would move faster than GhostRider's while just running 1 train. Mystic Timbers at Kings Island is a GCI wooden coaster which is even shorter than GhostRider in duration but runs 3 trains. The ride has a theoretical capacity of 1,200 riders per hour if trains are dispatched every 72 seconds, but it generally averages about 850 riders per hour, nearly double the capacity of GhostRider. Mystic Timbers runs the exact same trains as GhostRider and doesn't allow loose articles on the platform. Watch this example of how fast a train can be loaded at Mystic Timbers. Just 45 seconds with 4 attendants checking lap bars and seatbelts. This is because as soon as the air gates open, guests are getting straight into the trains and buckling up, rather than taking their sweet time to place their belongings in the 1 storage bin on the platform. So why doesn't Cedar Fair have GhostRider operate at the same throughput as Mystic Timbers? Let's say if Knott's Berry Farm added a 3rd train to GhostRider, reprogrammed C and D block to operate independently from one another, and most importantly, got rid of the loose article bins on the platform and required all guests to place belongings in a locker beforehand, preferably free lockers of course. With the train stacked on the brake run, it takes about 30 seconds for the next train to park after the one beforehand was dispatched. Combine that with a roughly 45-second unload and load process, and you can hypothetically dispatch from the station every 75 seconds. This leads to 48 dispatches per hour and a capacity of 1,152 riders per hour. But let's say even if it took 60 seconds to unload and load a train, meaning a dispatch every 90 seconds when factoring in the 30-second idle time, that's still 40 trains an hour and 960 riders per hour. Or even at a 75-second load time and 105-second dispatches. That's 34 dispatches and 816 riders per hour, which is nearly double the ride's current average operating capacity. What I just don't understand is how Cedar Fair allows GhostRider to operate the way it does when it's in the same park chain. Kings Island basically operates the same ride at double the capacity. And this would be like if Carowinds consistently operates Intimidator with 3 trains like it always does, and if Kings Island were instead to operate Diamondback with only 2 trains on the regular and stack every single time. There should be a level of consistency that's held between all the similar rides, and the goal should be the better output. So in the case of GhostRider, it should run 3 trains like Mystic Timbers does. And with Kings Island, they see less annual attendance and have more major roller coasters that also operate at higher capacities, like Diamondback, Banshee, The Beast, and Orion, meaning better crowd management. While Knott's has Accelerator, a low-capacity coaster that often runs with one train, and Hangtime, another low-capacity coaster with 16-person trains. The only saving grace is Silver Bullet, which has decent capacity thanks to its larger 32-passenger trains. I know Cedar Fair doesn't try to interfere that much with the way Knott's operates, and I think that's fine from a theme and charm aspect, but when it comes down to operations, they absolutely should interfere with this. The increase in guest satisfaction would be immense if they doubled GhostRider's capacity. And I know you might not like the idea of having to place your belongings in a locker, but if it means the ride's average wait time drops from 2 hours to 1 hour, and more people are able to easily ride GhostRider on every visit, I think it's worth it. Knott's and Cedar Fair, if you're watching, please change something. I find the horrific capacity of GhostRider to be a major downside to Knott's Berry Farm, a park that could otherwise be one of the country's best. Look at Silver Dollar City, a park with similar charm and history as Knott's, but they operate their rides exceptionally well. They don't stack trains on their RMC, which is also super short in duration. Like I mentioned earlier, running at a higher capacity would allow more guests to ride GhostRider every day. It will keep its line consistently shorter and improve guest satisfaction. The only downside from having to use lockers is that the ride will cycle more and wear out faster. But I say run the ride at a higher capacity and close it for a few weeks every now and then for repairs. And anyway, GCI did rebuild the ride to handle a beating. But aside from its terrible operations, I see GhostRider as one of the best wooden roller coasters out there. It's not the most intense thing in the world, but it offers an experience that I find brings me pure joy and excitement. It has a long duration, and I don't find it repetitive whatsoever. I love the floater airtime, lateral forces, and non-stop pacing that make the ride feel faster and faster the further you go into the layout. Without a doubt, this is the flagship ride at Knott's Berry Farm, and it's a must-ride roller coaster, especially if you love a good Woody. But I wish you luck with its line. The ride is located right near the main entrance and will gather a long wait quickly. If only it didn't operate at such a low capacity. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this video taught you something new. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and go ride GhostRider. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.